Welcome to another episode of At Home with Joseph. The 4th of July is coming up, and it's the perfect time to make ice cream sandwiches. Mine are always homemade. A chocolate chip cookie with a vanilla ice cream is the perfect dessert to end your summer barbecue. The first part of making ice cream sandwiches successfully is to pre-scoop out your ice cream and get it frozen into balls on a sheet tray in your freezer. It ensures that when you go to put the ice cream sandwiches together that your ice cream is not going to melt all over the place, ruining the cookies. So all you want to do is heat up your scoop in a container of hot water, but make sure you wipe it off because you don't want to get water in your ice cream, but it'll warm it up to create a nice full scoop, and go ahead and scoop that out on your tray. And after every scoop, clean off your ice cream scooper and do another one. And we're going to fill this tray up and get this into the freezer, and we're going to move on to our cookie dough. While there are 100 recipes for chocolate chip cookies, I love the old Neiman Marcus chocolate chip cookie recipe. I got this out of their cookbook and I adapted it a little bit for myself. It is a fantastic recipe, and I use these cookies to make my ice cream sandwiches with. We're going to start with creaming the butter and the sugar. We've got 1.5 cups of butter at room temperature. We've got 3 cups of brown sugar. And we've got 9 tablespoons of white sugar. The success of this recipe is all about how you cream the sugar and the butter together. You want to get it started on a low speed because it becomes quite messy. And as it starts to cream together, you can turn it up. This recipe calls for creaming for 6 full minutes. So it's very important to follow that direction. I wanted to show you, this is after about a minute of creaming. You can see it looks nice and creamy, but this isn't anything what it's going to look like after 6 minutes. After 6 minutes, you can see how nice and fluffy that butter and sugar combination is. Getting all of that air whipped into there is going to produce a really tender, very nice and moist cookie. While that butter sits, we're going to sift together our flour, baking soda, baking powder, and sea salt. Just using a little whisk, we're just going to mix it around and make sure it's fully incorporated. And the other thing that I like to add to the flour mixture is instant espresso. The original recipe doesn't call for this, but I really like the complexity that the espresso flavor gives to the cookies, especially with vanilla ice cream. To this butter and sugar mixture, we're going to add 4 eggs. And you're going to want to scrape down your sides while you're doing this. You want to get it all nice and mixed together. You don't want to overbeat the eggs, so you want to do this on a low speed. To that, we're going to add 6 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Bear in mind that this recipe is actually tripled because I like to make a lot of cookies and freeze them so that I can just pull them out and use them rather than making one recipe at a time. You can see how light and fluffy and airy that is. This is how it should look after it's creamed with the eggs and the vanilla in it. And on low speed, a little at a time, we're going to add the flour to the butter. You don't want to overmix this, you want to add it just till it's incorporated. The dough will get pretty stiff as you're adding the flour. Add in the last bit of flour. And just give that a whirl until it's incorporated. Add your chocolate chips. And finally, I always turn my cookie dough out into another bowl just to make sure that it's all really incorporated well. You want to make sure that there isn't any dry flour anywhere. So just give it a few good turns and a few kneads. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to scoop this right onto our trays and then refrigerate our dough. And one of the keys to getting the perfect cookie for the perfect sandwich is use the same size scoop that you used for the ice cream to make your cookies. Just keep it flat on the bottom. And that's going to bake out to be the perfect size cookie. So we're going to get those into the refrigerator. They should refrigerate for about an hour before going into the oven. You want them nice and stiff so that when they bake, they flatten, they don't spread. And then we will come back and assemble our cookies. So while our cookies are being frozen, we're going to cut about 2-inch strips of parchment paper to wrap around the cookies just to make a really nice presentation. And it's very easy to do. All you want to do is measure out about a 2-inch piece on a sheet of parchment and keep folding it over in accordion style about the same size. And just make sure your edges are always flush as you keep folding. Once we've got it folded, we're going to flatten it out and use something that has a straight edge that you can run just a simple razor blade along its edge to make a cut. This is going to give it a nice clean edge, which would be very difficult to achieve using scissors. So I'm just using a mailer from the post office, but you can use a ruler, anything that has a stiff straight edge. And you're just very gently going to run your razor blade down your straight edge where the crease is. You're also going to want to cut about a 3-foot piece of butcher twine, and this is what's going to tie the parchment around the cookie sandwich. So we're going to double this up to tie it, so a 3-foot piece is about just right. And you're also going to want to have some double-sided tape to secure the end of the parchment paper once it's wrapped around the cookie. So now we're going to start assembling our sandwiches. We've got our chilled frozen cookies here. And if you remember, we pre-scooped our vanilla ice cream and froze it so that it made assembly very easy and so that the ice cream wasn't melting all over the place. We're gonna work in batches in doing this. So we're gonna pull 1 scoop of ice cream out of the freezer at a time, assemble the cookie, get it back in the freezer to re-chill. I've got a separate tray with parchment already in the freezer, ready and set for the finished cookies. So working on some parchment paper, because you want to keep your surface clean, you're just going to lightly flatten out your ice cream with the back of a spatula. And it makes a nice flat surface, and it makes it very easy just to scoop it off, put your ice cream in the middle of the cookies, and get that right back into the freezer. Second ice cream scoop, flatten it out. You want to make sure it's flattened to about the size of the cookie. Scoop it off and top it with your other cookie. Look how nice and clean and beautiful that is. And once the parchment is wrapped around that with the red and white twine, it's going to be really beautiful. If your work surface starts to get a little bit dirty, that's why I like to work with parchment paper. You can just fold it over and you've got a nice clean surface again. These make a wonderful treat for a barbecue or even a bring to a friend's house if you're going over for a dinner party. Events are made up in 3 components: the setting, the menu, and the memories. And these sure would make a really beautiful memory for a 4th of July picnic. You can use any kind of ice cream when making these. I'm using a vanilla ice cream because I have a white chocolate chip cookie. But you could even make these with an oatmeal cookie and use a coconut ice cream in it, would be really nice. You could even do a dark chocolate cookie with a vanilla cherry ice cream, would also be delicious and beautiful. Once you're finished assembling your ice cream cookies, you're going to want to let them sit in the freezer for about an hour to fully re-chill before wrapping them. Get yourself set up and ready to wrap the cookies before you bring them out of the freezer. Again, we're going to work one at a time so that they stay frozen. You're just going to wrap your collar around the cookie. Give it a little piece of double-sided tape to hold it. And then you're going to wrap your string right around where the ice cream is. Give it a little bit of a cinch, not too much of one. Tie it off. Give the ends a snip so that they're short little ends, and get it right back into the freezer. Thank you so much for joining me. We are ready to serve our guests for 4th of July. This is probably going to be one of the first gatherings that everybody's going to be convening together since the pandemic. So make it memorable and do something special. These ice cream sandwich cookies are a perfect dessert to serve at your next barbecue. I wish you all a happy 4th of July, and make sure to like and subscribe to At Home with Joseph on YouTube and on Instagram, and stay tuned for our next video, which is going to be making topiaries out of a Coleus plant. Thanks so much.